folks. I've got a very, very short presentation here. Wombo is a consumer AI company. We've been around since 2021. We make apps. So we make mobile apps that people can download on their phones. Our bread and butter has always been to find some interesting AI pipeline or model that's out in the open source, package it up into a fun and easy to use product that anyone with absolutely no expertise in AI could use, and release it to the world for as free as possible. So we've got two apps on screen here. The first is called Wombo. Concept here was you would take a selfie, pick a song, and the AI would animate your selfie, and you get this like funny meme video back. The second one is called Dream, which is, in my opinion, the best mobile app for image generation, text to image. It also predates Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion. It was live on the App Store since before any of those things existed. And between these two apps, we've got something like 200 million downloads. And I guess how do pregnant men tie in? So we're always trying to go viral, and we hate paying for advertising. And so all of our virality is driven by content that people love to share and show each other. Our apps are the same way. We've never paid for a download. And so we just chase, the algorithm tells us what it wants. Lately, it's been wanting pregnant men, and so that's what we deliver.
So what algorithm tells you that you need pregnant men?
The attention algorithm. TikTok, Instagram, pregnant men, and so that's what we deliver. Where content is performing well on those apps, then you're winning the battle for attention.
The attention motivation flywheel.
That's right.
That you guys plug in. So you know all about incentivization and incentive mechanisms in some sense, because you're playing in that world, but it's the attention mechanism. So when we got you on the call, the reason why you wanted to be up here on the stage, Zion, is you reached out to me. You said, "Hey, look, we're switching directions. We're going to pull down the subnet." You use the words subnet seppuku. Very creative of you. So let's go down like memory lane here, and so you guys join the community, and you're like, let's make a subnet straight out, and then let's take us from there to here.
Yeah. So we formed sn30 in late February of 2024. And the intention was to create something like a decentralized meme machine. So a subnet that could both execute various AI pipelines to create a piece of high quality content, and then reward the people who contributed to the creation of that content with some tau based on its real world performance. That was sort of the idealistic vision. So you use the subnet to make a TikTok video. The TikTok video gets 1 million views. And because the 1 million views corresponded to 10% of the views that day, you get X amount of tau, something along those lines. And well, unfortunately, we ran into some difficulties despite our best intentions. If possible, I'd like to invite Ash on stage to talk about some of the interesting challenges and nuances between compute discrepancies, difficulties in fair scoring, trust inconsistencies, and balancing sort of the real world usage with the network capabilities.
Sure, I can get them on stage. What was their name?
Ashley, and I think she might actually be missing from the audience, so I might just talk about this
yeah, sure.
myself for now.
Let's talk tech.
So every step of the way, we ran into challenges of, oh, we've got Ash to save me here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, nice to be here. Okay, so about the difficulties we had on bittensor, trying to get the network to actually handle real-world traffic and just handling media creation in general. One of the first major issues was a few validators. There's like 12 to 20, and there's a few hundred miners. The miners have a lot of compute. They're willing to provide the compute to get incentive. While the validators typically have one node, sometimes running through Runbot or other virtual providers. And when we tried to route user data through that, there would always be the bottleneck of the validator. We couldn't get enough traffic through the network because if we want the data to be validated and not like cheated by the miners, we need to go through the validator, and that always caused a sort of bottleneck. And along with that, we had a mechanism for figuring out how much a miner can handle of real-world traffic using a stress test. It's basically DDoSing the miner to see how much they can handle. A lot of issues with that, where the validator's network just wasn't strong enough to test the miner, and thus it would score the miner unfairly because the validator's network would like not be strong enough to actually send enough requests to the miner, and that would reflect on the miner score rather than on the validator, which was very unfair to the people providing most compute. Like you had people running load balancers with hundreds of GPUs, and they could handle a lot of load, but then the validators wouldn't be able to score that. And the validators that do score that had lower vtrust because most validators couldn't. They were mostly running on Runbot with bad networks. So it was very difficult to scale the network up to handle all of that media creation. Even when we routed real-world traffic from the Dream app to the subnet, it lagged behind. Generations were taking up to 60 seconds of timing out because of that.
This is interesting. So you came across these technical issues with the subnet, and did you guys know what you were trying to optimize, Zion, back then? Like, what was the thing that the subnet was trying to maximize? Like, was it inference speed or like diversity?
Yeah, it was essentially inference speed. We wanted miners to be able to run high performance, predefined AI pipelines that we knew would be valuable in some content generation pipeline.
And most of these would be like stable diffusion.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, that kind of connects to another point, which is there's already a handful of subnets which are all about high performance image generation. And so even if we had sort of our own, nuanced approach and unique ideas, like kind of big picture, it matters less when there's three other people doing it, and we can all kind of fork from each other's subnets. And so we just didn't feel that with the rate of progress we were making towards the ultimate goal of rewarding people for posting high quality content and getting engagement on it, it just wasn't worth it to continue pursuing this, especially when we have like a more exciting idea that I'll tell you guys about next.
But going back to this like core problem of like, hey, we want stable diffusion models, inference really fast. Which subnets on bittensor are actually doing that in a way that Wombo can use? Like, if you were the client rather than the subnet owner creator, which is it 19 and 22?
It's 19 and 23, exactly.
23, right? And have you worked with those teams, or are planning to work with those?
Yeah, we've worked with 23 since we've gotten involved in bittensor.
Which was with Mr. Niche.
That's right.
And he was somehow related to your entrance into bittensor.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So Mr. Niche was one of the first guys we were talking to in like January and February about getting involved, finding a use case for Wombo, and eventually launching our own subnet.
That's very cool. And what is that looking like right now as a backend for Wombo? Like, have you found success in this using NicheNet as your backend?
Yes, we found success using both NicheNet and our own subnet as Wombo's backend. So today, if you go into the Dream image generator app, dream.ai, there's a Tau style. Tau style produces Tau images, which if you scroll past all the pregnant men on Twitter, you can also see. They're quite beautiful. They look like this. And so,
so just a question about this. So like when you guys were doing the deterministic validation for the miners on your subnet, you decided to make that deterministic validation actually do two jobs, right? Validate the miners, the fact that they can generate images, but also to generate taus.
yes, exactly.
And so how many strange tau images did we generate?
I think it's in the millions. We can confirm that. We also ran a small campaign where anyone who posted one of these could get like 0.1 tau, which is not a huge amount, but it's not zero either, and had some nice posts from that as well.
Cool. So you found yourself with the subnet and discovered that I think that it is somewhat of a very difficult engineering problem to really wield bittensor properly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're offshoring, outsourcing, pardon me. You're outsourcing some of that work to these other subnets, and so that made you guys think about pivoting. And let's go there.
Yeah, so essentially we kind of took a serious look at ourselves, and we felt that Subnet 30 was not on a clear and confident path to meeting its goals. And, we could invent some new roadmap that kept at least some weight lingering on a subnet. But we, the team, lost some of the energy and passion that we had for it. And frankly, we're just far more excited about a new idea. So I want to tell the audience here about that. But before we do that, there's two quick items. First, we want to do a live subnet Stefaku where we deregister live on the call. So I'm hoping Ash can do that for us.
Yep, give me a second. Screen sharing works for once.
Looks like you're still loading.
Okay, I think you should be able to see it now.
I cannot. I don't know the rest of the call.
I can't see it. It might be a permissions thing. Sometimes this is an issue if you don't have permissions on your Discord to screen share. Have you done this? Have you done a screen share before? Mike can see it. At least one person out there in the world works here for pop physics. Vivek can't see it. It's a Discord button more likely. Do you want to leave and come back and give it a go? Just turn it off and on again. I'll bring her up.
Some cosmic suspense.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's hope this works.
Oh yeah, Dr. P, close his eyes. Yeah, just go close your eyes and then you can see the screen.
She's
Zion, are you? And now she's just gone entirely. And that's too bad because I believe that it was just going to be somewhat of a suspenseful event.
Well,
Can you do it from your side?
I'll be frank. I'm too retarded to do it from my side. We'll have to wait for Ash.
Okay. I'll bring her up on the stage again. What if I share my screen and then she shares her screen and we watch her screen through my screen? Or Mike, we bring Mike up on the stage who can see her screen, get him to share his screen of her share sharing screen.
Can you see it now?
I can't,
No,
but I
it's
think we
not-
should just let's nuke it, and maybe you can post a screenshot of the.
Yeah, let's do screenshots. We'll do screenshots. I mean,
Okay.
we're about to nuke a subnet.
Oh wait, wrong. Command. This one, sn30. Okay, let's hope this goes well.
I'll see if I can disconnect, reconnect, maybe.
Nope, because the Finny network likes to hate me. We'll try that again.
So some people can, that's interesting. Like why? Discord's
I
such
don't
a.
think I don't
Sometimes
think it
I
matters too much.
I really
As long as
regret the day that we went onto Discord. We
some
could-
people can see it.
Can you imagine how much
if-
more professional we'd all be if we were on Slack together?
Oh God,
True.
please no.
You know,
Well,
we'd-
some people
we'd
can
all be
still
wearing-
see it. Some people can still.
All right, I'm gonna quit Discord and then try to throw it back up here. One moment, please.
Yep, go ahead.
So the second part of this is, as of right now,
There it is.
we have approximately 400 tau in our wallet, and we're going to be donating this tau back to the community.
Hell yeah.
Let's see here. So we've got 400 tau. 100 is going back to the sn30 miners who spent their hard-earned tau registering a miner. 100 tau will go to Mr. Niche, who has been fucking awesome homie, supporting us from the start, and really tau filled us more than anybody. 100 tau to Everett, who both just seems like an awesome community member who really gives a shit about what's happening here. Also is making an amazing documentary about bittensor that I can't wait to see. And provided us with the training set of tau images that we used to make the custom tau image generator. We're donating 50 tau to Fish, because he just seems like a provocative little crazy dude. And I think it's good to have people like him in the community who speak their mind and, you know, aren't afraid of taboos. Really important in my opinion. Two more. We got a Roush and Taoshi who not only run a really innovative and interesting subnet, but are also pushing the standard of how weight gets allocated across subnets forward, which we think is valiant and needed. And finally, General Tau Ventures. These guys are sort of behind-the-scenes partners to a handful of bittensor subnets. They're guys we know well locally in Toronto, who we respect, who we trust, who we know can be relied on. And so for all of this tau, it comes with absolutely zero strings attached. We expect nothing in return. And we chose these people because we thought they would put the tau to good use in improving the community.
Wow, that's real beautiful gesture from the team. Yeah, go Torontonians. Some really good Torontonians up in the bittensor ecosystem, super based. Wow. Does anybody in the community who just received the tau airdrop like to come on stage and say some words with your award? No, Fish is crying. So let's talk about this decision, Zion. I think it's actually really cool. Just jumping in here, that as a community we're sort of pro death and revival, right? Like ever since Subnet 4 did this, like they were like, hey, we think that we should drop our weights. Like our incentive mechanism is not aligned yet. We're going to come back stronger, and they're doing amazing work right now. I'll shout out to them. There was another subnet that did this. It was the bid ads team that said, hey, drop our weights for now. We want to make sure this is aligned. It really showcases like this culture that we have in the ecosystem about let's protect Tau, right? But I want to hear your thoughts on it. Like, Zion, like, what's the motivation behind this?
Well, it just felt unfair to keep this Tau, and I don't want to be misleading whatsoever. We've earned a very handsome amount of Tau as subnet owner. We use that to fund this development. We churned some of that Tau into US dollars. And that's just sort of the reality of, I guess, running a business, running an operation. But when we were thinking about what's next for us, it just felt inappropriate and icky to take this Tau and sort of be like, sorry guys, we fucked up. Like, we're going to make a new subnet. Better luck next time. Like, I think it's really important for us to show to the community that we're serious about what we're doing. Even though Subnet 30, we think, was to some extent a failed experiment, we hope the next one isn't. And fundamentally, the people that are getting this Tau are going to put it to use. We've got enough Tau to register a new subnet.
Awesome. Let's talk about that. What's new?
Yeah. So we are really interested and excited in consumer grade AI. Both bringing AI to the mainstream, but also utilizing the AI in the hands of the mainstream. Everybody's got an iPhone, everybody's got a MacBook, everybody's got a gaming computer, so everyone's got a PlayStation. Some people have Teslas. These are all devices owned by regular people, so not data center owners, but regular people, which are perfectly capable of running AI. And right now, this is untapped computing power. There's billions of these devices, and they're sitting around for most of the day doing nothing. Of course, it's a very different kind of power than what you would find in a traditional data center, where you can NV-link thousands of H100s together and get a totally different kind of performance. But we still believe that there's a massive amount of power sitting in these devices. And from the perspective of decentralization and democratization, it's even more interesting. Think about the situation on bittensor today. For some given subnet, you've got, let's say, 200 miners and 50 validators or so. So 250 people or 250 groups are splitting the emissions from that subnet. But what if you had a subnet with 10 million miners, and each of them are leaving their phone plugged in at night, running some kind of AI workload, and individually they're each earning a smaller piece, but they're still contributing a huge amount of computing power. You've decentralized who is participating in this game by multiple orders of magnitude, and you've made AI more accessible and available in the process. So there's definitely some major challenges with this. If you try to run stable diffusion on an iPhone or a MacBook, you're not going to get anywhere near the performance of running it on an H100 in a data center. And so there's a huge need for optimization and sort of efficient resource utilization, and a lot of room to improve there. And so all of this stuff was kind of like the big picture motivation, something we've been thinking about for a while. We've got a large user base, so we're thinking about how can we use our own user base's compute. And there's lots of benefits to this edge computing. You've got reduced latency, improved privacy, lower bandwidth. So all of that brought us to two projects. The first is called W.AI, and I'll briefly show that. So this is W.AI. I'm going to drop the link in the chat as well. It's a little trippy. And W.AI is basically this whole concept taken to its extreme limit. What happens when you do have 100 million people donating their compute to an AGI hive mind? What does that look like? What's the sort of impact on the world? How do we get there? And the second is edge maxing. Edge maxing is our new subnet. It's currently in testnet. It's our bittensor specific implementation of this idea. And it's focused on maximizing the performance of consumer grade hardware. I'll let Ash share more of the detail, but I'll just give an example here, which will hopefully be helpful. Let's say we're trying to run Stable Diffusion as efficiently as possible on MacBooks. Essentially, what will happen in the subnet is every day there's a competition. Miners get to submit their runtime that says, okay, here's how you should run Stable Diffusion on a MacBook. Validators will then take that runtime, run it on the right device, in this case a MacBook, check the performance, score the miners based on that performance, and we repeat that ad nauseum until we get hyper optimized models that can run on consumer grade hardware. So maybe I'll stop rambling for a bit here because I brought up a lot of different stuff, but that's the basic idea.
So let me see if I can parse this. You would set the mechanism up and ask miners to optimize the running of a machine learning model on some specific hardware spec. And I imagine the mechanism would reward the miners that can maximize that, right?
That's right. Yes.
Minimize that, and it's some sort of deterministic verification process. Hey, give me, and what is provided by the miners in this use case? So what did they produce?
Well, initially they'll produce a checkpoint that you can run, but it'll be a little bit more abstract than that, where you can just submit a runtime or like a MLIR graph that someone can run on their machine. And one way to think about what the subnet is doing is it's a benchmarking subnet. There's a benchmark for some model on some class of hardware, and you are trying to beat that benchmark. And after we've achieved great performance on one benchmark, we can move on to the next.
And isn't it a matter of quantization, right? Like that's one way that this is optimized for a specific architecture. And in that case, the outputs of the models will differ, no, based on the quantization that's being used, or is quantization allowed?
Everything is allowed. Anything goes. When we evaluate the miner's submission, we compare their result to what the base model would have produced with the same inputs, and they're scored on the accuracy. So if their more efficient model is substantially different from what the base model would have produced, they get punished. And we want to leave every technique and every possible way to accomplish this on the table.
What are the ways that you imagine people will do it? So quantization is obviously one of them. Are there other ways to even optimize the model beyond quantization that you're talking about here?
Yes, definitely. There's a few. So I think quantization is one. Neural architecture search is another. Pruning, knowledge distillation, hardware-aware sort of design, mixed precision training. There's a whole list that we kind of came up with, and when we eventually publish the README and the repo, we'll sort of give people some initial directions to explore. But my gut instinct is there's a lot of unexplored territory in optimizing models for these devices. And if we sort of extend our timeline a few years, pretty soon we're going to be running, like GPT-5 level models on people's iPhones.
When you're talking about neural architecture search or different types of training mechanisms for this incentive mechanism, if you have to retrain the model, you'll certainly lose its ability to come anywhere in terms of accuracy on the production of images similar to the base model, right? So doesn't that, in many ways, completely cancel out or make impossible many of these optimization mechanisms you're talking about? Or how does your validation work to allow that?
So I can only speak from Wombo's own experience. This model optimization is something that we have deep expertise in. And so we've done the thing where you take a stable diffusion model and it's taking 30 seconds to generate an image. You get that down to 3. You go from making 1,000 images per dollar to 10,000 images per dollar. That's like a muscle that is well trained and developed inside of Wombo. And so I certainly believe it's possible. And I'm looking forward to sharing our techniques with the community. But we'll have to see. I mean, as subnet owner, we'll have to make sure our validation mechanism is doing what it's supposed to do. We'll have to see if miners sort of rise to the occasion and come up with some interesting solutions. As of right now, it's just another experiment, another fantasy.
It's definitely a very interesting direction to go. It's almost like we're tunneling down rather than scaling up. I really like the idea. And things like neural architecture search, which Mutex put in here, great idea. Distillation techniques, fantastic. I think that the difficulty will be on the validation side about what you allow or disallow by the miners. And perhaps instead of measuring the Euclidean or mean squared error distance between the base model's output and the one produced by this image generator, you actually want to have a specific benchmark that allows them to explore a much wider space in terms of quantization and training and neural architecture search? No?
No, that's a great point. I agree with you.
Mutex, obviously, in the chat, probably has a fair amount to say on this topic. I mean, neural architecture search is something we're doing on bittensor, and perhaps there's some cross-subnet communication that can be done by the miners there, and what they're trying to do on this subnet. It's very that expression from Steve Jobs. I think the story goes that he's talking to his engineers about the startup time for a Mac, and they're arguing over what seems to be a hair length change in terms of seconds to turn on the computer, but when you spread that out over thousands and thousands of devices, millions, billions of devices over multiple years, you're talking about many lifetimes of humans in terms of seconds. Mm-hmm. That seems to be where you guys are focusing. It's you're saving lifetimes if we can optimize this down.
100%. And I mean, I'm just excited about a universe where anyone with an iPhone can mine tau. And even if they're earning 10 or 100 times less than what a miner with a bunch of H100s can earn, I think a world in which millions of people are leaving their iPhone plugged in next to their bed overnight and earning like half a tau is something I'm really, really excited about.
Or anyone with a tau black phone.
Anyone with a tau black phone, exactly.
Disclaimer: highly likely a scam. Don't buy the phone on my suggestion. So yeah, please note the phone law. I would be very happily surprised if indeed it becomes a reality and Wombo can run Stable Diffusion 10 or bittensor Diffusion 30 on those phones. Perhaps you guys should get in the phone making business. I'm sure you'll do better jobs on it. So going forward, like, this is exciting. When are you guys planning on this subnet? How much time do you guys need? What are your next steps, the future direction for Wombo and bittensor?
Yeah, we love this project. The competition, the competitive element that exists here across subnets, across miners, truly has a magical outcome. It's amazing that there's this machine that's just emitting 7,200 tau a day into the universe, and that's having all kinds of strange butterfly effects. And edge maxing should be live sometime next week. We're currently live on testnet, and I'll post our channel link in the group chat. And yeah, we're here to stay. We're excited about what's next.
Why edge maxing?
Because we're maximizing the performance of edge compute.
Okay, thank God.
And it sounds a little provocative.
It's a little provocative. This is Wombo is provocative. We got to have all takes all types in our ecosystem. So thanks for coming on the stage, Zion. You can stay up here. We're gonna jump over into Garrett. You're gonna take the call here. I'll mute myself.
I can just be on your audio.
Okay. Yeah. Just speak through here. Okay.
Cool. Hey guys, Carrot here, coming through Const Audio. Last week we did a little bit of a session with you guys and really outlining our efforts for moving forward as OTF, as from the foundation. And one of those things that we really wanted to commit to is transparency, and we wanted to continue that on these novelty searches. So today, I wanted to give you an update on the developments that we announced last week. And so I'll go ahead and give you guys some information here. I'm gonna share my screen for us to see, and hopefully we can all view that.
We can.
Excellent. So I want to talk about Liquid Alpha. And this was something that we announced last week, and Const did a breakdown of how it works. Essentially, it's this new feature to increase the bonds the validators receive relative to the incentive of the miners, where bonds actually increase as the incentive of the miners decrease. And this is going to have some interesting effects in the community, and we're really excited for it. We wanted to give you guys an update on where this is at. So we launched this in our testnet clone environment, and we found some bugs. We found some issues, and so we are addressing those right now, and we think this will be ready to go on testnet by Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that, and we'll make announcements to the community with documentation on how to test that by then. So we're really excited for what's coming there. And then the next thing I want to talk about is the other things that we're working on this sprint, particularly with chain bloat and child hotkeys. So these are both features that are really needed in the bittensor ecosystem for a couple of reasons. Chain bloat is really about just making sure we are prepared for the kind of scale we are looking to foster here in bittensor. And then we have child hotkeys, and this is the really exciting feature for this sprint. And this will give us a lot of benefits in a few different ways. Give us some new security for validators. It'll give new options for staking, and it just unlocks a lot of capability for the bittensor platform. So these items are both on track and are being actively developed here at OTF. But we want to make sure we really get this right, because child hotkeys especially is going to have a pretty significant impact on the bittensor ecosystem. And so what we're going to do is we're going to deliver this in one sprint from now. And we'll issue this to the testnet community at that time. And we'll have documentation to go along with that so that you guys can properly test this out and really experience this and see how powerful it is. And so to give you a little bit of a preview about what that might look like from a BT-CLE side, we have this slide here about use case and Const. I know that you wanted to kind of go through a little bit of this. So
It's a bit of a minimal slide, but I want us to really linger on the importance of this innovation for the way in which stake will be moving around in the ecosystem. It was a year ago that we introduced nominated stake, which completely changed the way in which we organized ourselves as a community. It was only a year ago that we even had the ability to say not run a validator in bittensor and participate through a liquid democracy system, of which elevated people like Keith and Tau Validator and even the OpenTensor Foundation and Tau Stats. These delegates only really are a year old. And what we're innovating here with the ability to set child hotkeys, I mean, I'll talk a little bit what I mean by that exactly. It means that we'll be able to give stake weight to a specific individual to run a validator for us on a subnet of our choice. So for instance, I got Keith in the audience here. I hope, actually, Keith, if you want to come up on the stage, I'd love to speak to you about this, because I think it really is relevant for you. Keith can delegate his stake weight to Wombo's new subnet without the need to run a validator. In fact, he can find a client for him to run a validator that wants the bandwidth on that subnet. So this perfect context for talking about child hotkeys is what happened on Wombo. You guys had a subnet that in some sense you built it so that it could be a backend Zion for your applications. You built it for yourself as the customers, but you didn't even have the bandwidth to make that happen. But with something like child hotkeys, we could very easily delegate our funds to you in your subnet so that you can have that backend that you've built for yourself. And with lowering the take amount that your hotkey is pulling from that delegation all the way to zero, eventually paying the parent delegate for the privilege of having that stake weight in that specific subnet. So Zion, did that make sense to you? Like, imagine if the experience from you for you 6 months ago was that you could have come to OpenTensor and said, hey, give me 1.2 million tau worth of weight in subnet 30, and we're going to use that to control the network, to push the miners in the right direction. We're not going to have to go to Eugene and say, hey, we need you to push these changes. Keith could have said, hey, you know what? I think Zion is definitely the people that is definitely the person, and Wombo is definitely the team that should have the bandwidth here. I don't want to have to focus on running all those validators. I can just move my stake over to a team, maybe a competitive team. Maybe there's a team that will come on and say, hey, I want to have this amount of bandwidth on this subnet, and I'm willing to pay a bit more for that. So does that make sense to you, Zion? Can you imagine that feature in place?
Yeah, 100%. We even got Ash here saying basically exactly what we needed.
Yeah, we needed this.
We should have unsuicide. We should unsuicide now.
Yeah, too late. Sorry. Maybe we actually said we were going to announce this stuff at the beginning of the call, and then we just forgot. So fate has it that you deleted your subnet. But we can always come back and create it again. And I want to speak to Keith about this and have a conversation with you, Keith, because obviously you're in the weeds, and I think probably overloaded in some sense on your team, running validators everywhere. But I want to sell to you how this will change the game, and we should all be prepared, especially you, conceptually, for what's coming down the pipes.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this sounds like an innovation that we're going to be able to use the subnets to finally allow the subnet owners to take advantage of what they're building. Because there's several most, I would say, of the subnets now where I'm not really equipped to find the customer base for them, or even the optimal use case, or to do any kind of like business development around building some type of business around the utility that's offered through the bandwidth of the validator. But the best people a lot of times to do that, because they were the ones for the idea that had the idea for the subnet, they've already got a user base, sometimes it's themselves, are the subnet owners. And if it's not them, this actually spawns a whole new, almost like mini economy, where people can find the customers or find the use cases for these subnets, and then petition the validators for their bandwidth, charge a small fee for that or whatever, and it creates kind of like a whole new entity within the ecosystem.
Exactly. I think that we're going to exponentiate the number of validators or people that can play a validator style role in bittensor just and attract delegated stake from people on specific subnets. Hey, I only really care about subnet 22 or 23 or 30's bandwidth, so I'm going to focus there as a validator and participate in just this ecosystem rather than all of the ecosystems. And as a segue, I think like this, the reason why we need these sort of not micro, but they're stepping stone innovations that will allow us to push to having way more subnets. Scaling the performance and the competition at the validator side, so that we have way more validators that can participate in these tasks and focus become specialized in validating on specific ecosystems. I think is going to allow us to scale, and that's a big deal for us. So this is the second time I've announced this change, but I want to bring it back front and center and have a conversation, hopefully, with the people on the stage. If there's anyone else who wants to come up on stage and talk about this or has comments or questions about this change, or the novelty search comment section, or really anything. Honestly, we can open the conversation to anyone. That's all we wanted to share from OpenTensor itself. Would root validators just give stake to subnet owners to manage their own validation? Give stake to subnet owners to manage their own validation? Yeah, exactly. So root validators, which are just the massive validation, can delegate their stake off to the owners. And I think that by default, it makes sense to give it to the owner. They're sort of the trusted companion within inside of the subnet itself, and they know what needs to be changed and potentially how the subnet should be run. Also, what would be the incentive for the new validator? Just that it just taking take so they can set weights on the subnet? Yeah, they have more power in the subnet. I think that's the major thing. Allows them to have some more control, but also they know how to monetize the bandwidth better than anyone. So we're putting that problem of monetization into the hands of the people that actually know how to get it done. So it's about aligning objectives and incentives here. Hey, Yoav, thanks for joining the stage.
Hey, thank you. I'm actually curious to ask a question going back to Zion, what you shared about the subnet, and I'm with the new subnet that you guys are putting together. I'm curious to ask you. I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective from the subnet perspective. At what point, and I'm not sure that I asked this very what am I trying to say? I'm not sure that my question is very accurate, but let's work through it together. At what point, when you build this new subnet now, at what point would you want / expect to start getting or receiving some emissions for what you've built? Like from your perspective, what would be that point?
Yeah, great question. From my perspective, one, we have a responsibility before, during, and after launching the subnet to communicate our plans and intentions to the validators who set the weights in the community more broadly. So at minimum, that sort of level of understanding needs to be established. We believe that the sort of long-term vision of the subnet presents massive opportunity. And simultaneously, we believe that the subnet can start delivering value very early in its lifespan. Like, it shouldn't take 6 months or 3 months for these competitions to start yielding optimized models. If you're asking me, I think it would be fair for us to receive some emission at or close to launch, and to sort of fund the development and incentivize some of the initial miners to participate, with the bulk of the emissions being applied after we've demonstrated that the subnet mechanism works, that it's doing what it's supposed to do, and that it's delivering some real world value. I guess one last thing that I forgot to mention when I was introducing the subnet, all of these optimizations to models are going to be open sourced. So it won't just be Wombo or W.AI that benefits from these more optimized models existing. It'll be the entire AI community and I guess more broadly the world. So yeah, I hope those are the things going through people's minds when they're deciding if they should set weight to our subnet or not.
Awesome. So I'm curious to ask you kind of like a follow-up question, because you said, okay, so when I launch, and tell me if I got this right. When I launch, I think it would make sense to at least kind of like cover cost, right? So like the development cost would be covered. How, like, let's say I'm a validator, like how would I know what these costs are?
Well, you could only really know them if we shared them, and that's certainly something I'm open to do. So, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd be curious also to hear, what Const and Keith think on this question.
Keith?
Yeah, so the question is, we're talking about how can we create more visibility around how subnet owners are using the emissions that they're receiving? Is that kind of the track that we're going down?
I think it's a two-part question. The first part is, I was actually curious about the perspective of the subnet owner. When do they expect to start receiving some emissions, right? And now I'm curious actually to hear your perspective. When do you think, or when do you start giving emission to a subnet? Like what is that threshold that they need to cross from your perspective in order to get that?
Yeah, this is one of the hardest things to come up with as a validator, is the proper allocation of emissions to the various subnets that exist on the network. This goes back to the conversation actually around the child hotkeys, because if we're going to continue to kind of ride this train of the validator owners, doing the allocation of emissions, there has to be a different lever for deciding kind of how to optimize that next level of the network, because there is no way for me to know how the allocation of the capital that's flowing into these subnets is being distributed. Obviously, there's anecdotal things like team size or whatever, but what I wish I could do is look at have a magic ball, and just see like how much of the tau flowing into the subnet is being reinvested into development for that subnet's objective. Obviously, that's not possible. So the next best thing you can do is kind of like go down the check boxes of like, okay, is it delivering utility? Is it creating visibility for, for the project in general? How is the mining fair on the subnet? And there's, you can go down the rabbit hole with this thing and sort of fall and never come out. And I've spent weeks now trying to like redo the way that I allocate the 7 or 8% of the network that our validator is responsible for. And I keep like tearing everything up and restarting again, because it's very hard to come up with something that's like sustainable and that makes sense to everyone that's participating, and that's also agile enough to take into account the developments that are happening each week or every 2 weeks on the subnets. So in my like eventual answer to this is dynamic tau is the only way for you to do this effectively. But I do think that this movement towards assigning the the ability to basically put your weight with these different players in the ecosystem will change the way that bittensor runs with the child hotkeys, because I'm just thinking about like how someone that wants to come in and run a validator on one of these subnets and allocate emissions or whatever, it's really hard to break into bittensor. You need 20,000 tau or whatever to like basically validate and have responses from the miners coming in without getting blacklisted. But this sort of new paradigm allows new entrants to come in and with a business use case or a very friendly model for optimally running a validator on a specific subnet, even offering negative returns or essentially paying for that bandwidth. It just flips the whole thing on its head. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is things like dynamic tau that change the responsibility from like these kind of oligarchy setup that we have today, which is fine for bootstrapping. But in the end, there's no way to kind of suss out what you're asking for is like, when's the right time? It's different for every subnet,
Yeah. I'm curious, do you have any rubric that you use? I mean, it sounds like you actually put quite a bit of effort to trying to come up with some kind of like equitable solution.
Well, this is what I'm saying is that the most equitable solution is for me to give the stake to basically a
Yeah.
validator that is optimally utilizing the bandwidth on that subnet. And the setting of emissions, the paradigm must change from just, one person being responsible for setting things to the market being responsible for it. So yeah, I mean, I have a rubric. I think most of the larger validators have something that they've put together. Some have shared this type of rubric and some have not. As a one-man band here, or even with multiple people, there is no way to stay on top of the 100 different variables that go into deciding is a subnet valuable or not. There's just no way for one team to do it effectively, and that's not even considering all of the things that you've got as far as like, whatever temptations there are to cut some corners on those evaluations.
Totally.
Yeah, Zion, I can answer your question also from our perspective. And it's, as Keith said, it is difficult to come up with a clear rubric, but we are doing that. Actually, we are putting together a much clearer rubric right now, and working on doing like in-depth subnet reviews of the mechanisms so that we can be much more objective about when things are working or not working the way that we think is good for bittensor. But like, I can speak my mind on this, which is a subnet is a machine, and subnet owners are machine makers. But the tau that goes into a subnet mostly goes to the validators and miners. The subnet owners actually only get, 1/5, less than 1/5 of the tau that goes there. So this quality of the team, the branding of the team, the communication of the team has to be, in some sense, 20% of the determination. The real important thing is whether or not the machine works, because that's where the majority of the value is going. And bittensor subnets have a quality, which is that when they work, they explode in a particular direction. So they optimize some value if done right. You should see in a subnet the maximization of storage of compute, or the loss signal, or in your subnet's case, you should be able to actually say, hey, look here, we've optimized this, or we're optimizing this. And that's the real determiner of weights. Because the question has to be, should we press into that curve? Right? Like, this machine is capable of optimizing this thing at this rate. Does it make sense for us to push more value into that optimization? Is there bang for buck? Is there a return on that investment for the community in terms of producing something, producing trained models, optimizing models like you're doing? So that's why I always push subnet owners to get very metric focused. Hey, this is this very specific thing that we're pushing, and you can see it dropping, and we think that we can do better if we, have more emission. That's the real question. It's not, hey, we're doing a good job over here, don't you like us? It's, is the machine working? So hopefully that answer, gives you some color around the way that we try to think, about what would be good for bittensor when we set weights.
Makes sense.
Yeah, they're machines, right? But as we're inventing the rubric, we're also inventing the art. And one of the things that's in the case of sn30, right? Like you guys discovered, this is trailblazing, right? We give you a template, but that template isn't everything. It's not cookie cutter. This is not like, hey, you come and build a blockchain, or here's a toolkit for making an app. And there's so much unexplored territory in the space of what can be done with bittensor's incentives, and no one has No one really knows. We've invented a new game. It's like we just created the game of Go, right? And it's the year 1450 or something, and no one knows how to play the game, and we're going to discover how to play. And someone is figuring out a new mechanism, a new shape, a new structure in the space of incentives. So it's okay. I think it's fantastic that with your subnet, the one that you guys closed down today, you said to yourselves, well, okay, this isn't making sense. I think, well, let's close it down, restart, re-aim the machine somewhere else, and find a different structure, another DNA sequence that will produce a machine that is more productive for the ecosystem. So I think it's super positive. Easy Trades is on the stage. Did you want to speak, Easy Trades? Easy Trades. If you, yeah, you might have, yeah, share screen. Just vibing. You can type your question into the channel if you're not able to get your mic on, Easy Trades. But I'll just go to the channel for questions. Is there a place in the architecture where easily replicable one-click deploys are valuable? Been thinking about this lately. As far as I know, most miners don't want other people to be able to deploy their same producer, but is that not the case for validators, root validators? I mean, generally, like, the subnet owners are trying to build the validators in as one click as possible, but I don't think that there's necessarily I don't have a clear answer to that question, and maybe Keith, you have a better one. Probably, maybe not. I don't know if you understood that.
We're talking about one-click validator launching. We have actually a number of subnets that have gone a long way in this, where with just the minimal amount of configuration, you'll like either do it through a .env file, or maybe you'll edit something that they've included in their repo. Then you're just, changing it, putting in your subtensor, putting in your hotkey, cold key name, and basically hitting start. And yeah, it is pretty damn close to one button validation. Maybe it takes 5 minutes to set up, versus some of the more difficult setups maybe take multiple servers, and you're kind of tinkering for a half hour or an hour to get it up and running.
Yeah. SandGod says in the DAO context, when DAOs are delegated to the parent hotkey, which would be more. Okay, yeah. Those DAOs can be delegated directly to the subnet pools, or is it just global tau weight that is being delegated? Or is it just global tau weight? It's global. Oh, I see. No, it would be specific. In the DAO context, it would be specific, subnet specific tau. But that's a whole other level of complexity that we're not there yet for. We still need to introduce some of these concepts first before we can go into the hyperdimensional one. So Mr. Cole had a question. Has anyone spoken about the blockchain validators themselves, which are currently centralized under OTF control? Is there any roadmap to decentralize hardened validator security? Yeah, we're pegging next year, Mr. Cole. We think that, generally speaking, our priority is economic decentralization. So getting tau into the most number of people's hands, having economic decentralization so that we can have chain validator decentralization hardened into the fact that there's many different people out there which have a lot of tau, and therefore control how consensus is made at that level. So it's our primary concern right now is the current S-tau and D-tau pushes, which is coming this year as fast as we can. And we're not focusing on pushing the chain to proof of stake in the next 4 to 6 months. No worries. A cold key that is not delegated can directly stake to the child hotkey. Yes, you could do that, but it wouldn't make too much sense. And I'll explain that in a bit, perhaps. But you'll see that if you're just a nominator, if you're just a standard nominator, you don't want to stake directly into or stake to a key that is only on one subnet. It doesn't make much sense. Yeah. Get back to work, Mr. Cole. Cool, everyone. Well, thanks for coming to the call, and Zion, I really appreciate you coming up on the stage, man. That was awesome.
Likewise, thank you very much for the platform. We're excited for Edge Maxim. And stay tuned. We'll be back next week.
Take care. Ciao, everyone. Bye.
All right. Well, yeah, like I mentioned, I guess if you are a person watching this and you need a good one-click deployment solution, especially for a Web3 node, let me know. Been working with a team that's really, really good at that lately, and we are looking to kind of branch out a little bit. But I am going to cut this now so that I can do the publishing thing so that people can watch this if they